Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you. 2 days to finish with Gemini. 2 days to begin with the last month of our path. Let's begin with the topic for today, which is history. When I say history, don't mistake with story. Even if it has the same etymology, it has a different option of description. Okay, so don't take it as story, take it as history. Okay, but anyway, we will say how they connect because they had the same etymology. So first of all, let's try to resignify what history means, because for sure when we say history, everyone starts to think about the past. Like history is something that it's located behind us. If we perceive that we are the present, so everything that came before is what we relate to the past, which is history for us. But that concept is not precisely when we try to understand what is history etymologically speaking. So that's why we will go, as always, to the origin of the word. So the word history comes from this verb, which is oida. Oida. That means to see something. And this word gives this other word, which is oideia, that means idea. So why is this relation between the verb see and idea? Because the word oida, that describes the verb to see something outside, it's related to imaging, to an image. So everyone can understand that when you see something, you see the image, the shape of the things. So when you close your eyes and you create like an image inside, trying to memorize so outside, you are creating a mental image. So that mental image is what we call an idea. So these two words are strictly related because of imagination. This is why oida and oideia is a mental image. Okay, from this word oideia, we have this word hoistor. Hoistor means the subject, the guy that is doing the action. So hoistor, the wise one, the one that has idea, one that has the idea. That also gives us the word witness. So is the one that have seen something and has an idea from what that person saw. Okay, if I want to write the attribute of this wise person that has witnessed what happened and that has an idea of what happened, we will call it hoistoria, which is the attribute of the wise person that is the witness of things that he saw. Hoistoria. And this is the word that gives origin to our word history. So I guess that is really important to understand the history of the word history, because we can change our point of view from believing that history is a measurement of things through time towards the concept of acknowledging things that happened, to realize about the things that we incorporated from what happened, what we acknowledge. So history is not related to what happened, is related to what I know that happened. And of course, because of this, is related to the experience. It's the experience that made me be witness of what happened. So the reason why history had to be called history as something that you can measure through time is because of what happened to science in the 16th century, which is the beginning of the scientific method, which is something that stopped the idea of measuring the things of reality according to the subject, and they started to explain the things through object, which means this: in the experimentation, you have to make an experiment so you can prove that this is real, but it's not from the point of view of the subject. You have to do many tests in many different ways, and many can prove that you are right. The scientific method says that it should not be something subjective, it should be something objective that tells you that something is true. When historians took that scientific method, they stopped being storytellers that told the things that they knew, that they saw, that they remember, and they began to be people that were trying to objectively explain how things happen. So that's why they start to measure time in facts. And that's why also the history turned out to be something also scientific and stopped being something subjective. So what happened here? That the facts started to be organized in a line. So we started to call history something that you can measure in a time. And this is when we have a whole change of the concept of history. So what we started to do with history's scientific point of view is that we started to see history in a very objective way as something that we have to study, which is outside, as an object that we have to analyze, and we stop living it as a very human thing from our daily life. We separate ourselves from history. We started to see and measure time, history in a line, in a point of view that we can study it not being related to those facts. As in the science happened, in the method happened, that we started to see the scientific method, we started to make the experiments trying to be out of our human touch, because we wanted to have a very objective results. So science said that if we are involved, we could change the result of the experiment. The same happened with history. We started to measure history from the outside in a very cold way, so we are not involved in that, and we can understand the actual facts of what happened. So what happened when we study the history in that way is that people start to see the facts, but what they see is not actually what happened, because you are not feeling it. You are not understanding the environment of why those things happen. So we are not really interacting with the idea of the facts that were happening because we are looking at it from the outside. So when we start to see in a very scientific way the history, suddenly there are many facts that you cannot really explain because you were not living that in that moment, and used to actually take in some history, some stories according to what they had discovered from the tools that they had objectively, but because they are not engaging with that real history, you can lose many data and just taking only one side of the story. Like, for example, here, the pyramids. What historians used to do is to study history. For example, the pyramids, they don't study really the pyramids. They study what the history told them, what are the pyramids, what is around the pyramids, what other people has told. And this is not because historians want to lie to us or whatever. No, it's just because they just see the tools that they have around the fact and they don't leave the fact actually. I will try to make a drawing to understand this. Tengo aquí un periodo histórico que es la construcción de las pirámides. En este momento, I don't know if you will get it because there are so many lines. Okay. Let's go to this frame here. So first of all, let's go through here. We have the construction of the pyramid in a certain period of time. We have the construction of the pyramid, and in this moment, the people that were living here, they were telling the stories orally. They were just speaking the stories because they were not using symbols to write. They were telling the stories, singing the stories. The story, the history of how it was built, which eventually, in this other period of time, Egyptian period of time, we have this story as mythology. Because here people are not historians, they're storytellers. They tell stories, they narrate the things so the people can listen and remember the stories. This is why they don't tell the actual story, they just tell mythology. They just explain things as they felt how they were generations through generations, after generations. So this mythology arrives into our current time as fiction. So we don't believe anymore in mythology, and we think that mythology was a weird way in which they believed, but it was just a story to understand the history. So from our point of view today, believing that it's fiction, for them, it was fiction, it was a story, but they had a different way to tell the story. It is not like us. Today we have a different way to tell the story. They explain history through concepts and stuff like they were very abstract. So that for us is fiction, but it doesn't mean that it was just fake ideas. It was the way in which they were able to translate that history in their time. So now in the Egyptian period, this is Atlantean period, now we have the Egyptian period. What we have is the reconstruction of the pyramids and all the temples around. So this new culture, that the Egyptian culture, they will do is to narrate, to describe what they were seeing. And they won't describe what happened before. They will describe how greater is what they are doing now. They will describe everything that they were rebuilding, reconstructing. And they mix that with mythology. So they describe how it was the reconstruction of the pyramids. Okay. So what happened? After this period, we have erosion. So the pyramid starts to break. They start to get like this as we see them today. In this middle point, we have another cultures, which was the Greek Roman times. In the Greek Roman times, the historians were very different from the historians from today. The historians in the Greek Roman time, they thought that in order to honor history, you needed to rebuild the structures. You need to rebuild the things and paint it again and so on. So this is why some of the places that we find, they are exactly as the Roman and Greek people left it, not as the ancient people left it, because they remade them, remade everything. Okay, so it's very different from the point of view of historians in the 18th century, that they thought you should be objective. You should be, if you find a plan, you have to leave it exactly as you found it, because you have to honor the history, not touching the history. So it's a very opposite point of view of how the Greek Romans used to take history. So the difference between the Greek Roman times and ancient cultures regarding history, in front of our point of view of history since the 18th century, is that the Greek Roman culture believed the time was a circle. So the ancient cultures, they said, if time is a circle, everything must be recycled. So this is why we started to, in that time, they started to remake every temple that they found, because for them, it was the natural way of doing time. You need to remake once and again in the cycles. But in the 18th century, with the vision of time as a line, what they thought is that you should not touch history. You should, as you found it, because you have to tell the history and not mix the times. So we stop believing time is a cycle. We don't recycle history, and we just leave it as it was in the past. It's a different vision of time according to different periods of cultures. So one of the ways in which the present finds out what happened in the past is through the text that they found, or the traditions that they listened, and they try to reconstruct history through that. So basically, it's about what they read from what they found. And what they found and they are reading is basically what they have written, what they wrote in the past about the things, what they saw. So this is why it's very difficult to believe exactly the history of each one of the countries, because what we actually do with history is to read the story according to the people that wrote where they lived, which is not the actual truth. It's just their point of view. Just take as an example, like we are trying to investigate what happened in the Second World War, and there's no books from that time, and the only things that we found written were written by a Nazi. So what we could read from the Second World War would be basically very different from what really happened if we only read the text from these people. So this is why when we look into history and the historian says we read in a text from 3,000 years ago that they did this and that, you cannot assure that that's really what happened, because what they are reading is actually what someone was able to write. But it's not the actual truth. So basically, we have another way to compare if what we are reading is real, which is the test of carbon-14. But carbon-14 is only in the things that are organic, like bones, like tissues, or these kind of things. So you can only compare the age of the things according to if they have this chemical. So they make the test of the bodies that they found around the pyramid, and maybe they found a tomb of someone that said, I worked here in the pyramid as an architect. So they found the bone, they make that, and the test says 2400 BC. So if the bones are from 2400 BC and the text says that that person was an architect, so by deduction, they say they pyramid in that period of time. But just as deduction. So also a third way in which you can interpret history is through sediments. So geologists can tell you around in which periods of time these things happened because of the erosion, because some chemicals, some elements, like carbon, like iron, they accumulate in such a way in a process that can take thousands of years, so they can relate in which amount of time it was given that process. Now, what usually happens is that all these branches, like the geologist, the architect, the historian, they don't usually work together. They do their work by separate. So this is why sometimes we have a lot of lacks in the gaps in history, because they don't work together. They do their own job and they don't think in the whole. This is one of the things that we have lost when we decided to see history as a line instead of a whole, like a complete circle. So, for example, one of the things that happen usually is that the historians that work here, for example, the Egyptologists, they work with Egypt, and they don't ask themselves why there are pyramids in China and in Mexico, or the people in Mexico, maybe they don't ask themselves why there are pyramids in other parts of the world. They just study what they have in their territory. So we have a lack of connection of many different people working for the same history. People that is not historian, is many other disciplines altogether. As we have seen this point of view of history in this way, in a line, take us to a point in which we cannot relate with what happened in history, really, what people were living, because we are seeing just the objective things. So when we just base ourselves in the objective things, we cannot relate with the idea, the deep idea of things. Usually, for example, in Egypt, what we have is the idea that they were polytheistics, that believed in many gods, that they had many different beliefs. But actually, when you look into the mythology of Egypt, you will find out that the reason why they had so many gods is because they were honoring each one of the aspects of the divine, not because they just believed in many gods. There was something behind it that if you don't live and experience that, you will just see images and you will just see gods and people with animal heads. And that's it. So that's what they brought to us. That's why they explained to us about history. So from this, we can understand now that history has 2 points of views to be seen. One objective, the other one subjective. So from the objective point of view of history, the different situations, facts of history. From the subjective point of view of history, we can try to understand what these situations and facts bring me to do something, what they advise me to do. So from the point of view, when we go to school, when we study history at school, usually we see this point of view, the objective point of view, in which we position ourselves in the present, look behind towards the past, trying to see what happened. And it's actually useless to see the history in this way, because it's kind of like you are trying to know all the different things that happened, but none of them can affect you because they all went away. So you are just concerned about the future, and to know all this is just like a burden. People used to say it's important to know history if you want to change the future. It's important to recognize the roots of your story. But what for? The thing is that when we see the history in this way, to know the history is basically just useless. This is just about knowledge, about just accumulating data, and that's it. So when we start to see the history in a very subjective way, we start to change our point of view, because now the facts that we were learning in a line are coming back to us, because the history is not something outside of us. History is within us. We are the product of history. We are made of history. Each one of our cells has the knowledge, has the memory of what happened. So whatever we want to do in the future, we'll do it with the tools that we got in the past. So to know our history, to recognize and understand our history, is to understand that we have in order to change the future, to do something transcendental. It's not about learning a line of what happened. It's about learning what happened to me, to my body, to my family tree, to my history, to know what is within me. Okay? So remember that history is equals to wise witness. Wise witness, because history is about what you have experienced, what you have lived in your life. That it is about. Ability to witness with your own experience, to have lived history. So next time that you will look for history and try to understand something from the past, I would recommend you to just ask yourself about which history you have within, to wonder the answers that you have in your cells. So whenever you go to look for that history, you will absorb it much more better, because you will resound it within. So remember, history is not something that happened before of us. History is the actual life, is within us, is something that is part of us, and that is for us to create, to do new things. So it's actually living. We are living history. The vibration today is cool. The statement today is, I am a product of my history. The code today is, again, another one of the names of the 12 families of Atlantis that took care of the portals of the planet. So in honor to them, we say their name, which in this case today is Isthi. Let's go to the alignment. Sit comfortable, close your eyes, and concentrate in your breathings. Use this. I take a deep breath and become aware of my own physical body. As I become aware of my entire body, I pay attention from feet to my head, starting to move softly, slowly, each joint, from the toes, ankles, knees, hip, every vertebra and spine, the fingers, wrist, elbows, shoulders, neck, and jaw. Slowly, each one at its own time. Presta atención a cada movimiento, a cómo siente cada parte del cuerpo. Pay attention to each movement, how each part of the body feels. I allow myself to yawn as I stretch the body softly in a very smooth dance. Softly, I start to caress the body, each part of it, softly, as I recognize myself as a result of history, as I remember my story. I become aware of my life here and now, of the things that I do, the people I have around. I become aware of what is my role in my life. In an instant, I try to think about every fact, every story that brought me here where I find myself now. Try to remember my history in this life until the moment I was born. I breathe. And in this history, I find myself with my parents. I visualize, I feel, perceive the image of my two parents, mom and dad. And inside of them, inside of my parents, which are within me, in my cells, I can also feel my grandparents, granddad, grandmother, and their own parents. And I picture all of them as far as I could reach. And I can feel within all the heritage of all of them, the languages they spoke, the countries they lived, the experiences, the knowledge that I have them within me. And I start to feel, to perceive this family, a long history, the last 2,000 years, other 3,000 years of humanity, of this history, acknowledging that always in all this time, there was someone from my family, someone from I inherit. And as I caress my body, I am hugging that history. I recognize in my cells the last 700,000 years of humanity, the 3 million years of creation of our species. I recognize in me the last 60 million years that allow the mammals to live in the surface of Earth. All of them honored in me. I honor all the great creatures of the Cretacic, Jurassic, and Triassic that live in me. I honor the last millions of years that allowed the existence of life, of oxygen, and I take a deep breath I honor the last 4,500 million years of Earth and the Moon that made me be what I am each day. I am a product of history. I am a product of history. I am product of history. I am a product of history. I think, I think, I think. I am the history alive. Take a deep breath. I start to stretch the body slowly, and each one at its own time. Come back here and now. Thank you, everybody, for being here another day. And as always, see you tomorrow at the same time.